Okay, are you thinking about buying or selling a home in 2025? Today, I'm going to talk to you about 4 important topics that you need to know about what's happening in the United States relative to home values, inventory, and any other factor that might just help you make a decision as to whether now is the right time, whether it's August of 2025 when I'm shooting this video, throughout the rest of 2025, or even into 2026. In fact, today I'm going to cover 4 distinct topics. Number 1, the dynamic shift from what was at one time a very strong seller's market post-pandemic into now what is more of a buyer's market in many parts of the United States. Number 2, what I'll call the tale of 2 markets. We've got such disparity regionally between the Northeast and the Midwest, what's going on there with inventory and home values, and what we're seeing in the South and the West with inventory and home values. Third thing we're going to talk about is home price trends, what's going on across the United States. We're going to talk about the upper end top 10 markets, the lower end top 10 markets, and the top 50 markets across the US. And then finally, interest rates. What's going on with rates? Are they stable? Are they moving? And how does that affect you, home buyers and home sellers? My name is Adam Stein. I'm the broker and owner of Century 21 Stein Posner here in sunny South Florida. And every month I give you both local market updates and what's going on in the United States of America. So keep watching. If you like my content, feel free to subscribe, make any comments, ask me any questions. I'll be thrilled to help you out. Okay, so we're talking about a dynamic shift from what was at one time a seller's market. You remember, pandemic came around in 2020. 2021, we saw this massive increase in buyer demand across the United States. We saw home values skyrocket. Since 2021, we've seen a 55% increase in home values across the United States. That is a very large amount over a very short period of time. And so what we're seeing now, 2025, is we're actually seeing a shift. There are more sellers in the market nationally than there are buyers. In fact, there's about 500,000, this is what the data shows, about 500,000 more sellers nationally than buyers in the marketplace today. But that is definitely not the case across all of the United States. In fact, in the Northeast, we're seeing actually more of an increase in buyers than sellers in the Northeast. We're seeing about equilibrium in the Midwest, about the same amount. But then you shift to the South, we see way more home sellers than we do buyers. And we see in the West more home sellers than we do buyers. And so it's very interesting because if, for example, and I do want to remind you that real estate is very localized. What might be going on in your state or your city or your region could be different than in another state or city or region. And so it's important to get with a real estate professional who knows your local market, who can give you this kind of information relative to what's happening right in your hometown or your area. But let's say that you're in the Northeast and you want to move down here to the South, sunny South Florida. Well, the statistics are favorable for you. There's more buyers than sellers in the Northeast. There's a shortage of inventory in the Northeast. You would be able to put your home on the market, probably capture, presuming it's priced properly relative to the marketplace, capture a lot of interest and attention, get that home sold for a good price in a short amount of time with a buyer that'll close. And now you can move to Florida and have all sorts of options because there are more sellers in the market, more supply in the market than there are buyers, and the demand is less. You're also going to have more options, which means you've got some negotiating strength, some negotiating power. So that dynamic works great. But let's flip it around. Let's say that you're here in Florida or anywhere else in the South and you want to move to the Midwest or to the Northeast. It's going to be harder. You're going to have to put your home on the market, be very aggressive with your pricing structure. I'm not saying you should underprice your home, but you're going to need to be aggressive relative to the competing properties at your price point. And you may end up sitting on the market longer. And then when you go to relocate to the Northeast or to the Midwest, you're going to have a much more competitive environment as a buyer. So it's very interesting to understand what that looks like regionally across the United States. Let's also talk about inventory changes compared to pre-pandemic levels. So yes, we are in an increased inventory environment, but only in certain areas is it much higher or much lower. So let's talk about since the pandemic, July of 2019 compared to July of 2025, you can look at the graphic here. I have the United States. By the way, I get my data from sources like Realtor.com Redfin, which is a data aggregator and a website that looks at buyer traffic, seller traffic. And all of this is put together by one of our partners here in the real estate industry, Keeping Current Matters. So thank you guys for sharing the data so that I can then turn around and share it with our audience so that we can educate our consumers and realtors. If you're watching this is great data for you also to take and help your customers to better understand how to make good decisions in their marketplace. Anyway, we've got inventory up 30+% in July of 25 compared to July of 2019 in Texas, in Arizona, Washington State, Colorado, Tennessee, Florida, to name just a few that are up, have an increase in inventory and the higher amounts, 30+%. What about inventory that is significantly down compared to pre-pandemic levels, 2019 to 2025? Connecticut down 71%, New Jersey 60%, Illinois 63%, New York is down 50% inventory, meaning the amount of available homes to purchase as compared to pre-pandemic levels. So that is a lot of disparity across the United States, which again is why you need a local expert to help you consider what you're doing. But if you're thinking about relocating or moving around, then a bigger picture understanding will be important for you. Let's also talk about home price trends. And so we're seeing a swing of, let's call it about 10% to the pricing in certain markets in the Northeast and the Midwest, the top 10 markets. You're seeing increases so far this year, or actually year over year from July of 24 to July of 25, upwards of about 4 or 5%. Places like Cleveland or Louisville, Kentucky, Hartford, Connecticut. But to the downside, we're also seeing prices year over year down as much as 5 or 6%, places like Austin, Texas, Tampa, Florida. And so very interesting to understand that trend in different parts of the United States. Over the 50 major markets, we're seeing anywhere from about a 4 or 5% increase to a 5 or 6% decrease in home values. Here's what I've been seeing here in South Florida that's really, I think, comparable to the United States, which is we're seeing pricing stay relatively in that range, though. We're not seeing these rapid increases in value anymore like we saw from 2020, 21, 22, and so on. We're really starting to see pricing stabilize, which is a good thing. It gives predictability. It gives some calm, right, to the marketplace where we're no longer seeing these massive spikes in pricing. And so that's going to be very important for you as a home seller or a home buyer as you're positioning yourself in the market. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the strategies that I would consider employing if you are thinking about buying or selling, depending on where you're located here in the United States. Let's also talk about mortgage rates and projections. Now, I'm not an economist, but again, I do follow the data. And here on the slide I'm showing you, what we've seen really since the beginning of 2024 and expected through the end of 2026 is we're expecting interest rates to stay within a range of anywhere from 6 to 7%. Since beginning of 2024, we've seen interest rates really stay in between 6.5% and 7%. We haven't seen much change, which, while we'd all love to see lower interest rates from a borrowing perspective so that we can stimulate the market more, homes that are trying to be sold, we've got more buyer interest, and we know that even the slightest increase or decrease, in borrowing rate does have a big impact on a borrower's budget, and I'll show you that in a minute. No one is predicting that rates are going to move really too far below 6%, if at all. Here on the slide here, you see Fannie Mae's forecasting, the Mortgage Banker Association, Wells Fargo forecasting anywhere in a range from 6 to about 6.6% by the end of 2026. What that does mean, however, is calm and stability. And so at least as you're orienting your budget buyers, or if you're thinking about putting your home on the market, sellers, you understand that the component of the monthly housing expense called principal and interest is going to be relatively stable inside of a range. And so that does then help you kind of figure out what's the right thing for you to do. Of course, always consulting with your real estate professional, your mortgage professional, and the like to help guide you. And then I just want to show you one more slide here that just shows the slight variation of even a quarter to a half a point the same home loan amount, slightly reduced mortgage interest rate can save anywhere from about $66 to upwards of $132 a month in a buyer's budget, which can be significant. I mean, those are not small dollar amounts. Every dollar counts. And of course, I, as a real estate professional, am never counting anybody's money for them. The numbers do have to make sense for our buyers out there. And so if we do start to see some of this interest rate change, we start to see some of the interest rates starting to come down, ideally, we'll see that. It could be a little bit more palatable for buyers who are sitting on the sidelines, who want to come into the market, who want to start absorbing some of this inventory that our home sellers in the South and in the West are putting on the market. So if you are a home seller, it's really important for you to know what's happening in your local market. Obviously, if you're in the Northeast, maybe one of the states that we talked about, Connecticut, with a dramatic reduction in the amount of available homes for sale as compared to pre-pandemic levels, you're in the strong driver's seat. You know that there's going to be a strong buyer pool for you. Now, the other thing that was interesting on the slide that I showed you when we started is that even though there's more sellers than buyers in the South, the significant increase, the amount of demand in the South is still higher than in anywhere else in the United States. And so you've still got a lot of buyers looking in the South. You've just got more sellers. In the Northeast, if you're a seller, you're going to have more leverage to dictate kind of how you want it to go from a pricing and positioning standpoint. But there's just not as many buyers in that environment. So really important to know the difference. Again, I would encourage you to talk to your local real estate professional, your local mortgage professional, figure out what makes the most sense for you as you proceed here in 2025 and into 2026. Okay, I hope you found this information to be helpful. If you'd like to watch some more information about market updates, feel free to click on my next video. Otherwise, thanks again. Talk to you soon.